I believe that the people of Gaza will liberate Palestine, with us or without us. The question that everybody else needs to ask themselves is, what will you have done where you can say that I at least contributed and helped that effort, or I stood by and didn't do anything? Or even worse, made excuses to perpetuate the complicity or the active participation.
First of all, we must begin to think as an ummah. I mean, the very idea that we are thinking like an ummah is a new space in our minds that we're trying to create academically, institutionally.
The Ansar, the reason Allah forgave them, elevated them, is because their belief in the Ummah was so entrenched, it was so powerful. They didn't see Malay Rohingya, they didn't see Sudan, Yemen, Uyghur and the Turk. They didn't see any of it.
Inshallah, we're looking forward to having an open Q&A session. How do we balance between being a citizen of a democratic country who's a voter and can advocate towards, and an advocate towards the solidarity of the Ummah in a highly politically polarized Muslim majority country? Okay. Alongside that, I'll add another question. Much of the Ummatics discourse is currently about building, elevating, facilitating, cultivating. How much of Ummatics work would have to focus on destroying, as in taking down the batil, in particular the infrastructure of all the isms, secularism, liberalism, and feminism? Jazakallahu khairan.
I think we need to understand what voting is as a political technology and not be confused about what it can't do. So, there's lots of reasons why one might vote, and there's lots of reasons why one might not vote. But the question is a little bit more open-ended. It is, how does any intervention or any action, any political action, serve the Muslim Ummah, right? And there are situations, and I'm sure, Sami can tell us, I know there's developments happening in Australia right now, and we talk about the political situation, the upcoming election in the United States. Obviously, those are situations where Muslims are minorities, so it's not 100% the same scenario, but there's situations where you have a chance to make a difference, where you have a chance to make an impact. Maybe that impact is just making somebody lose. Maybe that impact is making a particular person win. Maybe that impact is just flexing some muscle so that everybody now understands that Muslims can actually act in unison and in coordinated effort so that it changes the political calculus of everybody who's partaking in that particular area. There's a lot of reasons, right? So, sometimes we get drawn into sort of black and white thinking or sort of yes-no thinking. I really think that we need to introduce a more exploratory dimension to our thinking and sort of look at what are the opportunities that present themselves to us as Ummatic actors, and are there easy wins? Are there easy W's? There low-hanging fruit for whether it's a political action such as voting or as anything else to further anything that's in the interest of the Ummah. That's sort of like a general philosophy thing that I think can be applied in many ways.
If I heard the question correctly, the one you just mentioned, it mentioned the inquisitor was in a Muslim majority country, yes, and a democratic one. So Muslim majority democratic country already is a rarity. You are in a place of blessing, as it were, and an opening actually to engage with the question mentioned the polarized atmosphere. My recommendation from that, coming from a Muslim majority country initially, which is not a democracy, is to get out of the echo chamber and the comfort zone of your particular political community and engage with the other side, or even just hang out the other side. Sometimes our very presence in those spaces, the spaces which we consider our polar opposite, has these are presumably secular spaces, maybe leftist spaces, I'm not sure, has the effect of bringing visibility to your stance, sometimes even without you saying as much as a word. So that's just something that occurred to me, given that your context was both Muslim and democratic.
Jazakumullah khairan.
Would you like me to answer the second question?
Feel free, yeah, please.
So I think the second question was about destruction or deconstruction that would be required in order to bring down the existing orders and ideologies. And the way I think about the Ummatics work is first understand the premise that there is constant change occurring around us. There are actors all around us, and often change that is some that is predicted and planned, but much that is not predicted and not planned. So the idea that how are we going to bring about the change that we want the question must be asked in a different way than we typically ask. I think we start with the assumption that the world around us is solid and permanent, and in order to change it, we need to do something unprecedented. But in reality, the world is constantly changing around us. And it is to understand the direction of that change in order to then contribute to it. That, in short, is my way. That's how I would contribute to Ummatics change. So is destruction part of Ummatics plan? No, Ummatics is a think tank. But deconstruction is, right? So you take down not buildings and not power structures, but you change the discourse on which those power structures' claims are based, make them unbelievable, make them unsustainable. Can we do that? We believe we can make that change, and the rest will be part of this constant flow of change that is already taking place. So I think that this is not to say that there is no point at which resistance does not take place. But look, Gaza is taking place, and resistance and suffering, that's something that's ongoing. So that's not something that we have to introduce. So we have to think about this differently, and inshallah we'll have more to say about that tomorrow, bi'ithnillah.
Inshallah, jazakumullah khairan.
Just on this one, concise one. About the Muslim majority country that we were talking about, Malaysia. This is mainly for the Malaysian intelligence officer who's probably sitting in the audience as well, who hears about destruction, deconstruction and things like that. God bless Malaysia and preserve it. I heard the Imam say, Allahumma ja'al baladana Malaysia, aminan mutma'innan, ameen inshallah. Ameen, yeah. In any case, I want to make just one observation here on this particular issue about agency, which is what the question is really focusing on. This is my second time in Malaysia, and I'll tell you the difference between one who appreciates power and one who doesn't. Malaysians tell me, Sami, we are a small country, we don't have much population, we don't have much power, we don't have much influence. And I look at him and I tell him, MashaAllah, in the world that I live in 2019, you had a prime minister called Mahathir Mohamad who called for a Kuala Lumpur summit in 2019. And he invited leaders of nations that represent more than half of the Muslim Ummah. It sounds very simple, right? It was such a display of agency that two Muslim nations, one has a couple of holy sites here and there, and the other one is, people like to make hijrah to it, while it massacres Sudan and slaughters it and the like. Views expressed on my own. These two countries, they weren't like the Malaysians who say we are weak. They weren't like Malaysians who said Malaysia is irrelevant. They said, probably didn't say A'udhu Billah. No, they said A'udhu Billah. They said, A'udhu Billah. Malaysia is about to shift the Ummah. Malaysia is about to bring about an irreversible change that we need to urgently move to stop. Malaysia is about to cause a shift that is going to permanently rupture the established power structures of the Muslim world. So they picked up the phone, he plays this game I think called cricket, Imran Khan. They tell him, Wallahi alladhi la ilaha illahu. If you go to Kuala Lumpur, we will withdraw our economic support for Pakistan and leave the Pakistan in an economic crisis. Joko Widodo of Indonesia, views expressed are my own. They are my own. Joko Widodo, if you fly from Jakarta 1 hour and a half and you represent 220 million Muslims and you go to Kuala Lumpur to supposedly weak Malaysia, we will cut our economic support for Indonesia. Imran Khan said, I'm sorry, and he went to this country and apologized. And Joko Widodo said, I'm cancelling. The point I want to make, a Muslim majority country, you were saying, go out and see. Because when they're insular, you don't realize the power you have. I saw your power in 2019, so I don't believe the Malaysian when he tells me he has no power, because I saw how scared Arab Zionists were when Malaysia actually decided to deploy its agency. So the issue is not that Malaysia doesn't have agency, and this is the sentence I want to finish on. The issue is that when Malaysia or Pakistan or maybe Turkey or maybe other Muslim countries, when they can see the right course of action in front of them, they calculate the price they need to pay for it, and they say to themselves, they look at their people, they look at the Ummah and they say, will Malaysians go with me on the path that is right and struggle with me? Probably not. I'm cancelling the summit. Pakistanis, if the country cuts the economic support, will Pakistanis be patient with me in the struggle that is to come? Probably not. The Ummah will not stand with me. The Ummah will not struggle with me. Let me take the easy way out. Let me retreat into my nation's borders. Let me retreat into my inner society and tell myself I don't really have the power, even though you do.
Someone asks, there are a lot of people and communities that believe one cannot pursue education, wealth, influence, and at the same time strive for one's religion. Do you suggest Muslims enter political spheres and develop political discourse more directly, despite the corruption in governments, rather than just influence one's country politically by boycotting and spreading awareness on social media? So that's a kind of strategy question. Perhaps I can take a question from the floor.
No, my question is, it is not a question. Ovamir used this phrase called paradox of double humiliation in your talk, and I was just curious to know more about it. So can you please expand this? What did you mean by this? Thank you.
You said paradox of double humiliation?
Yeah, it was, I think, it was not so much a paradox. I think I used the phrase double humiliation, by which I simply meant what is warned of, that what that ayah threatens is humiliation in this world. خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَى أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ, and punishment in afterlife.
Okay, so, and the other question, which I just mentioned, refers to sort of people's personal...
I don't have
you don't have
thought
a
on that. I don't want to...
Okay, I mean, and they add, people like Sheikh Nasruddin al-Albani prohibited people from mobilizing against their leaders. A similar question to that was asked specifically. There are so many questions, so I'm struggling to find that particular one. But about the verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u ar-rasul wa ulil amri minkum. Given that, how can we go against the demands of our rulers? So
the question is about ta'at wali al-amr, obedience to the ruler, which is of course, very powerful discourse in the Muslim world today, which holds something like the following: you must obey the ruler unless and until the ruler commits clear, open, unquestionable kufr, unless the ruler becomes an unbeliever. And because becoming an unbeliever in Muslim theology, particularly in Sunni theology, is nearly impossible without saying so, basically that doctrine means obeying the ruler, or at least obeying the ruler insofar as not questioning the ruler. And the short answer to that is that that's a misunderstanding of that verse. because that verse in fact goes on to say, when you disagree, you turn to Allah and the Messenger. And there are other hadith that are not that ayah, but hadith that are used in fact to back that opinion. But that's a bit of a longer topic. I have a YouTube presentation where I look at all the hadith that seem to prohibit rebellion and those that suggest holding rulers accountable. There are very clear hadiths in that camp and how one reconciles that. So that's a deep, that's an engaged question that I deal with elsewhere, and I'll just refer you to that.
Jazakallah khairan. So another question asks, you talk a lot about power and unity of the Ummah, citing the bulk of historical evidence. However, what about the internal conflicts and civil wars that happen in our backyard? These issues are concurrent and subsequently halt any progress that we can make in the form of organizations and agendas. How do we draw up positives in the light of these internal divisions, going back even to the early fitnas of the Ummah? Okay, do you want to go ahead and ask your question, if that's right?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Suleiman. First off, Jazakallah khair to all of you. I've heard all of you speak, and it's certainly been quite insightful. And of course to Ummatics for presenting this for the second time. Inshallah, maybe be many more years to come and growth for the organization. I want to circle back to something that I'm quite passionate about. I'm sure everyone is here. And the reason I'm circling back to this particular topic is because I do believe it is a priority for the Muslim world to solve, simply because there's a domino effect under it once it is solved. And I'm talking about Gaza. And the BDS movement, may Allah bless it, is fantastic. It worked out for South Africa with the apartheid. It's worked out for other sorts of scenarios similar to that. Clearly it is working, as Brother Sami had said. Look at what we have done. Look at what we have done. The proof is right there in front of your very eyes. How can you deny it? I ask myself, boycotting is a necessity. It's something that we must do to show our power, presence, our care. However, based off of all of the absurdities happening, not just from October 7th, but from the last several decades, clearly, I don't believe that only boycott will work. It is something that we must do and continue to do and slam hard on. It's clearly doing quite a bit of impact. I believe that there needs to be more to this. I'm not someone who wants to trump war or anything like that, or advocate for such a thing. But when you're killing so many people, the way the Zionist regime is doing, and they're just not stopping, and they're getting more and more, and they have so much political influence around the world, you've got to ask yourself, as a logical person, not just as just emotional, but shucks, is this boycott really going to fix the ultimate problem here? I mean, it's something we have to do, but there's something more needed. And do you think, what more is it that you think that we can do above and beyond the boycott? And it's really geared more towards Brother Sami, and then perhaps others can fill in.
I'm just going to say one thing very quickly, and then I'll let Brother Sami go on for an hour. And the esteemed scholars up here on the stage with me might disagree, but I believe that the people of Gaza will liberate Palestine, with us or without us. I don't believe that. Go ahead, Bismillah. If you follow, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully, the views expressed are the speakers. If you follow very carefully in Arabic what's going on and the different groups and what they say and what they've done, they already understand. They're not waiting with bated breath for help. Yes, they do say, where is the Ummah? It's a disappointment. But that is part of the calculus. That is already part. And I think, again, my own personal opinion, I think that they will triumph with or without us. The question that everybody else needs to ask themselves is, what will you have done to put yourself in a situation where you can say that I at least contributed and helped that effort, or I stood by and didn't do anything. Or even worse, I made excuses to perpetuate the complicity or the active participation in the land in which I live. And so what I tell Muslims in the US, because that's where I live, is that the most impactful thing that you can do is to change the foreign policy of the United States. That if the guns and the bombs stop flowing to Palestine, that it's, how long do you think Israel will last? Not very long. And they know that, and they say that. So listen to them when they tell you about themselves. That's literally what they're saying. So for, rather than a sort of maybe more Hollywood Rambo solution, I think that for especially the Muslims in the West that have nations that are directly sort of participating, that you can simply stop the harm. And I believe that the people of Gaza and Palestine will take care of the rest. Allah knows best.
In a very short, concise way, because I see people talking over there. Ya Rab, please, Ya Rab, help me out with this. I've been accused of being an optimist. And I think this is the wrong word to use for me. Because if you listen carefully to what I say, I never say what's coming next is going to be better. I say Allah has the ability to make it better, and Allah has the ability to change it, and I don't know when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change it. I'm not optimistic about what comes next. I'm optimistic that Allah is always in control. I'm optimistic that Allah has decided an outcome. I'm optimistic Allah has already decided how the outcome will come about. And therefore my heart is at ease that at the end of this long chapter, لِمَنِ الْمُلْكُ الْيَوْمِ لِلَّهِ الْوَاحِدِ الْقَهَارِ. This, I'm optimistic about this. Once I accept this, my question is not, how does it happen? My question is, Allah, I beg you, use me as part of making it happen. Allahumma, use me in whatever capacity. I'd like to pray in Al-Aqsa. But Ya Allah, I defer to your wisdom. If you have not written for me to pray in Al-Aqsa, at least let it be said, Sami evoked something in the hearts that led to a generation that went to Al-Aqsa. Ya Allah, I defer to your wisdom. If not that, let it that an idea that I said here resulted in an idea that led to an idea that led to Al-Aqsa. Ya Allah, I accept this for myself. The reason why I say this is, my question is not what's needed to liberate Al-Aqsa. My question is, Sami, what has Allah given you, and how can you use that to liberate Al-Aqsa or advance Islam or liberate the Uyghurs or support Sudan? What can you do, Ya Sami? I open the books, I go and learn it, I go and study it, I go and hear what's happening. Then I try to analyze it, then I try to convey it. Then I spend hours, how do I simplify it in sound bites so the audience can understand it? How can I win their attention? Because they won't give me more than 2 minutes. I need a joke every 4 minutes so I can restore the attention span, so they will give me more time so I can do it. Allahumma, what are the speaking techniques that I can use to get Usama to give me more time? Allahumma, what are the speaking techniques I can use to win more time? Because I'm desperate that, Ya Allah, I have limited eloquence, but I'm desperate to convey a message that the answer already lies in your heart. I don't know what it is, but I want to extract it from you. It was Salman al-Farisi who went to Rasulullah and said to him, Ya Rasulullah, let's build a trench. None of the Sahaba had the idea. The Rasulullah didn't know about the trenches. Salman came to him, and we remember his contribution for this because that idea alone saved them from an existential crisis. We remember them for these actions. And I finish on this. You never know when the change is coming. I'm from Sidi Bouzid. I'm from the land, the city where the Arab Spring began. If you had told me that my rundown city, although I love it, and I'm from the countryside area where I'm not near the city, if you had told me Sidi Bouzid is going to change the whole region, I'd told you, Akhi, whatever you're smoking, it's haram and you should stop. Really? I didn't know that Bouazizi, 2 villages down, would cause an Arab Spring, but Allah already decreed it. So I'm optimistic that Allah is preparing another round. My question is not what does it look like. My question is, am I ready to take advantage of it when it comes, and have I positioned myself to be used? And I am honored to sit here in Malaysia and not lecture you, not patronize you, to plead with you to see this as more than a conference, to see this as more than a convention, I am pleading with you to take something away and say, you know what, Bismillah, I wasn't going to do this, now I'm going to do it. I thought this idea was bad, now I'm going to try it. Try it, ya ibadallah, for wallahi, Allah rewards the striving. Move, ya ibadallah. If you move, things happen. If you stay still, you get swept away.
We have a whole bunch of questions. Before I go to the floor again, I'm just going to ask, three of them. One is probably for yourself, because it talks about, so let me know if you can hear me clearly. I heard the mention of Ummatic exceptionalism as a fundamental part of the Ummatic revival. If American exceptionalism is anything to go by, will this effort to label ourselves as exceptional, like what the Western countries, increase our exclusivism rather than our inclusivism? Will we become an ummah that's hard to reach because we think we are the exception? How will we bring people to Islam if we allude to ourselves with the label of exceptional? I'll add another one in from 122. I understand that some of you are familiar with Professor Wael Halaq's work. His book, The Impossible State, has pointed to the challenges of Islamic governance in the modern world, the incompatibility of Islamic governance with a post-Enlightenment modern state. Do you think these contradictions exist? If they do, how do you think Muslims can overcome the apparent contradictions between the Sharia and the modern state?
So I guess I have to answer the halaq question. I think that halaq has very important concerns that anybody who's interested in Ummatic thinking has to take very seriously. And the brother earlier was asking about the perceived failures, and I agree with the panel that we need to question what are we defining, or how are we defining success and failure. I don't think it's so simplistic. However, the premise of much of halaq's work is that the arrangement of power within a nation state as a political technology is fundamentally will undermine any Ummatic project because of the way that the Sharia is structured. And so halaq's line of inquiry gets us to think beyond the nation state as to what would a different political technology look like, what would a different arrangement of government look like that will be insulated from the same sort of mistakes that the nation state technology fell into, with the totalization of power, the control of education, that basically there's no power higher than the state. The state exists for its own end in and of itself, as opposed to being rather a tool of the Sharia, or something that is subjugated and accountable to Allah's will, the Sharia, things like that. So I think that that line of inquiry is very useful to the Ummatic project. That's why I've spent so much time studying it and explaining it. If you haven't seen on YouTube, I have a series with Paul Williams where I actually, halaq is very difficult to read for the average person, so I explain Impossible State, and then we're doing Restating Orientalism currently. So if you're interested in that sort of line of inquiry, you can check that out on YouTube, Blogging Theology, and that's basically it.
I'll just add a small comment there. Which is, first of all, I completely agree with Imam Tom. I think it's an important contribution to contend with, and I think it gives you some tools in your toolkit that will help you talk politically about how Islam has an alternative and important framework to bring into the world. I just want to add one comment though, which is when he uses the phrase impossible, he's not making a hukm shari'i. He's not trying to have a fiqh conversation. And so it's not that we should get upset by saying, he's saying you can't have Islamic governance today, because he's not talking about that topic. He just wants to point out that there's a very different philosophical, if I could use that word, structure or theory of power that Islamic governance has always had. So I just wanted to say that in a fiqh framing, the word impossible can't really be used. And the reason for that is that the fuqaha, the scholars of fiqh, they have to give people solutions to live in the world today. And the example I give, if you don't mind, is always, if there's a world where there's nothing to eat but pork, you can't say there's an impossible food. The fuqaha will always give you guidelines how to live. And so it's not a fiqh statement, and it's not, there's no such notion of impossibility as far as the hukm shari'i is concerned. There's only the notion of duty. And duty is, as we've been all saying in a different idiom, but altogether very similarly, it's about moving the envelope with guidance, with insight, So we leave the world better than we found it. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. Just building on, and I think it's crucial to think about this, the argument as that Halaq is making is truly philosophical, epistemological, about the incompatibility of two ways of seeing the world, but that living as Muslims in the world is a juristic duty, as it were. One thing I wanted to offer perhaps to the questioner is about Halaq's subsequent work, where he constructs a Moroccan philosopher's theory called Taha Abdurrahman. I think the book is called Reforming Modernity or something like that. Here he offers a bit more of a constructive rather than just a deconstructionist approach that might be of interest, and that is meant to be a contemporary model for how to think about a state that was of this time rather than the paradigmatic Sharia state that Halaq uses as a juxtaposition in that text, a state that was of this time and that was premised on an Islamic epistemology, as it were, an Islamic way of knowing and being, that is to say.
The Islamic exceptionalism.
So just in the interest of time, and because I'm just conscious of people standing to ask questions, I'll be very brief, don't mean to be curt. When I say Ummatic exceptionalism, I'm simply giving a name to the concept that is contained in the ayah, Kuntum khayra ummatin, you are the best of the community, you are ummatan wasatan, and as in the Sahifa of Medina, the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّهُمْ أُمَّةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ مِّن دُونِ النَّاسِ, that the believers are an ummah to the exclusion of all other people. And but more importantly, the idea that I'm trying to emphasize is that once you have access to revelation from God, and you know that this is revelation from God, laws change for you. You have a different deal, different way in which you will succeed. As Allah says to the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, Ummahatul Mu'mineen radiyallahu anhunna ajma'een, that lastunna ka ahadin minan nisa, you are not like other women. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means is, because you have been given this status that you have personal access to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are like no other woman. So if you are ungrateful or you disbelieve, then you don't have any excuse that other women might for ignorance. And so it's that kind of exceptionalism.
I think we're going to have to take the two on the floor as the final questions. I'm going to ask you to read them in quick succession. Please be very concise.
Thank you very much. I'm from Indonesia and my name is Rachel. There's this one thing that maybe we all agree. Many refugees are coming from Islamic State. When this conference saying that Islam unify us, the Ummah have the strong power, the country produces significant refugees yet. Again, I'm from Indonesia, working here in Malaysia, also part of the government. So we know that Malaysia law and Indonesia law are not, fully pro with the refugee. So they are safe under the UNHCR's aid. So knowing that Southeast Asia is a safe place and available for refugees, yet we know that refugees are coming from the Islamic State. I'm so sorry for saying that. Question is, where is the OIC? Where is the Ummatic? What is Ummatic if these people are still struggling? Because us, we're here. I'm also actively working for refugee kids, providing them education. We're struggling. And curriculum, we're struggling to find funding and stuff. Yet we're talking big stuff about Ummatic, bring all the Ummah together with the strength and stuff. But yet there's still students, kids, they're seeking for knowledge, education, yet the one who can provide them is UNHCR. So I need enlightenment here. Thank you so much.
So the sister, I don't hear so much a question as your very valid frustration, pain, and if you recall, I started my presentation with precisely the recognition of that disparity between the desire and the vision and the reality that we have abandoned the Ummah. So you're absolutely right to point that out. And that's precisely what we are advocating, not that the Ummah has solved those problems, but that we must begin to think as an Ummah, first of all. I mean, the very idea that we are thinking like an Ummah is a new space in our minds that doesn't exist, that we're trying to create. Academically speaking, institutionally speaking, the Ummah doesn't have anywhere to act. The nation state does, international institutions that are secular, they do. And so first there must be a space in our minds, in our vocabulary, so that we can ask these questions. So our claim is not that we can do better than the UN, but rather that we ought to. And how do we chart that path?
Sorry, thank you. I just want to add just a comment on this. You're very good to highlight refugees because it's a very important part of drawing the line of what we mean by Ummah ties. So the Holy Quran speaks a very great deal about a group called the Ibn Sabil. We often translate this as traveler, but nowadays travel is like going to Bali on honeymoon or something. And people wonder, why do I have to look after them? But I would like you to think of refugees as the Ibn Sabil, people who are not from where you are, they don't have roots, and the Quran is so interested that you have to look after these people. And so it's the part of a Quranic discourse of creating concern and community. We at National Zakat Foundation in the UK, 40% of the people we help are refugees and asylum seekers. As you know, in every country all over the world, these are often a pain point in public debates and politics and so on. What normally happens is, at the level below, it's people like ourselves who coordinate to care for these people. It was very, very common for people to go as refugees from the Muslim world to America, England, and convert to Christianity. It's very common. Why do they convert? It's because governments don't have typically that much care and support, because like I said, refugees are in this wrangling point between identity politics. And on the grassroots, often it's always faith communities that stand up for human beings, always. And in a lot of these Western countries, it's often church groups, and people come and they mix with them and then convert to Christianity. So all I wish to stress is, which came a lot in our themes today, leadership has a bottom-up element and has a top-down element. We have a duty to build, through our zakat even, let alone through other institutions, a message of a duty of care for believers who live in our midst, whatever their passport. That's, again, part of the pillar of zakat. If you're in what I call the minority context, you build the system bottom up. If you're in a context like here, we have to group our own communities. We have to lead, because it's still our duty. And I would also recommend lobbying institutions like, I think Malaysia has a very powerful zakat system, that we should engage with them and use our voice, because there are funds here that we should just start this conversation of the duty of care for all believers in our midst. I just wanted to add that.
Can I make one final point on this one? I think that your question, although it focuses on the refugees, humiliates the Ummah in terms of how it sees itself. And I'll give two examples. I always argue, and I get criticized for it, that we Muslims, we are experts in reading Quran and Hadith and making salat in the masjid like a Dajjal, with one eye. We read and do not understand the essence of what's being read. And I'll give you an example. There is a report that somebody went to Medina and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ could not house him. He asked his wives, is there anything we can offer the guest? And all of the wives said, we don't have anything except water in our home. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ asks the Sahaba, who will host him? So Sahaba look at each other and one man says, Ya Rasulullah, I will host him. The man goes home and says to his wife, what do we have in the home? She says, I have this very tiny piece that I was going to split between the kids. He says, turn the candles off and give it all to our guest, and we will pretend to eat with the guest, and we will, get our children to sleep so he doesn't notice. The hadith describes that ta'ajjab Allah, the word used is Allah is so, not in awe, but so proud of this servant of his. Taharrakat as-sama, the heavens have moved at this act. The Muslim reads the hadith and then looks at the refugees and says, why are they here? But there's another, somebody might say, Sami, this is about temporary charity. Refugees in Turkey have been 10 years. Erdogan has a point when he goes and begs for a meeting with Bashar al-Assad so he can find a way to kick the refugees and send them back so that he can appease the nationalist sentiments in Turkey. Views expressed are my own. They don't reflect anybody else's. If it's not live, please don't publish the recording until 4 days' time, because I'm going through Istanbul to Bosnia, inshallah. When I read the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is something that used to strike me, and I could not comprehend it because I could not see it in the modern world, nor could I see how it implements. And it directly links to the core of Ummatics. Ovamir, you will like this one. The Muhajirin, they leave Mecca. They are people of Mecca who are kicked out of Mecca by Quraysh. They can be described in many ways as refugees who go to Medina. The people of Medina, the Ansar, they receive those who are fleeing persecution from Mecca. We're all well and good on that part. Rohingya have come to Bangladesh. The Sudanese have gone to Chad. You're all with me so far, right? As far as you're concerned, the people Ansar of Medina are looking after Muhajirin temporarily until Muhajirin can go back. That is the modern interpretation of refugees in the Ummatic spectrum. Sister, what if I was to say to you that these people did not just come as refugees? When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dies, the leader of their city is from among the refugees who comes. Their belief in the Ummah is so powerful. It transcends the identity so much that the people of the land, the Ansar, see no hesitation, no reservation, no border, no boundary, nothing to block their hearts in saying that the Rohingya can lead Bangladesh, in saying that the Sudanese can rule Niger, in saying that the Arab can rule Malaysia, in saying that the Malay can rule Yemen. There is nothing, people are smirking because in their subconscious it sounds ridiculous. But when you read the seerah like a Dajjal, you don't see this point when you're reading it. Look at the debate between Ansar and Muhajirin. Ansar, they say, one emir from us, one emir from you. Because this is our land, we should also be entitled to rule it. They say there can't be two emirs. The Ansar, the reason Allah forgave them, the reason Allah elevated them, the reason Allah blessed them is because their belief in the Ummah was such, it was so entrenched, it was so powerful. They didn't see Malay Rohingya, they didn't see Sudan, Yemen, they didn't see Uyghur and the Turk, they didn't see any of it. All they saw is Muslim, rule, Muslim, have it, Muslim, it's yours, Muslim, you're here. Sister, your question is heartbreaking. You're saying that the Ansar, if they were here today, and it's true what you are saying, can you imagine Ansar saying, Muhajirun, we looked after you, ya Muhammad, for 10 years. When are you going home? Look how you cringed. But you've read it in the seerah. Can you imagine Ansar saying to the Muslims, you've taken Mecca now, you took your land back, you went to Myanmar, the government is toppled, the Rohingya are free. Take your land and get out of Medina. Look how you cringe because you realize the fitrah in your heart is saying how ridiculous this idea of a nation state is, how ridiculous this border is, how ridiculous this thinking is, how ridiculous it is that your ethnicity and the pride in it has led you to look at your Muslim brother as a burden when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he enters Mecca, let me make it even more compound. Open the other eye, read the seerah. Dr. Ovamir, ya Sohail, when the Ansar, after he enters Mecca, remember they're upset because they haven't got the spoils, right? And the Rasulullah says to them, what do you think that I give Mecca the spoils, but you take Rasulullah back to your land? Ansar don't say, no, you came as a refugee, it's time to leave. They say, Ya Rasulullah, marhaba, come. Ya Rasulullah, we love you, stay with us. Ya Rohingya, stay with us. Ya Sudani, stay with us. Ya Uyghur, stay with us. We don't say that in the Muslim world because we are dajjalic in the way we pray to Allah. We are dajjalic in the way we understand the deen. We pray 5 times, then look at the refugee like a guest or a stranger. While reading the seerah, we sit in a halaqah and say, MashaAllah, look what the Ansar did, but we don't want to be Ansar. And this is the reason why, ya ibadallah, when you ask me about Ummatics, Sami, why are you here with Ummatics? For me, the result is not something tangible in terms of conquering the world or destruction or deconstruction. For the Malaysian intelligence officer, relax, Habibi. Go back and report that all is good here. The aim of Ummatics is this subconscious blockchain that is in the back of your head. Break it. Unlock it. Read the seerah again. Open the other eye. Read it again. See the hypocrisy in the actions. And what you will find is power is in your hands. It exists already. It's right in front of you. But you cannot access it because you chained yourself. Because you read the seerah in the way that you wanted to, not in the way it was supposed to be revealed to you. Jazakallah khair, sister. You smashed it.
With that, I thank you all for your careful attendance. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.